Checking if I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, for the POI, just unmuted. Okay, hold on. Let me set my timer. All right. Um, I'll be starting my speech in three, two, one. You should realize, as Grace, you have never felt love in Earth before. Humanity failed you. You are isolated, you have no friends, and you have never even had a true friend in your entire life. But then, in this mission, you finally found one. You found Rocky, and you have truly felt appreciated for once in your life. Three, uh, three important uh, Two important stuff on to set up. Firstly, it's like what is the context here and characterization, and secondly, then what is the debate about then? I think like there's three important contexts here. With like A, this is important characterization for Grace. Like Grace is was heavily isolated on Earth, right? He was a really smart researcher and he has a really crazy innovation, crazy paper, but nobody cares about his paper and he has to survive being a biology teacher and he became broke and miserable just because he knows he's smart, but he just gains no appreciation at all. So he has like the he's been like depressed his entire life and he has no friends. And B then Grace got sent by a mission by NASA, right? Because he got no known by his research. But like this is the important thing. This mission has a low probability of surviving, right? Because he goes to space and all. And the context from the movie that it wasn't fully a yes from a Grace as well, because for the fact that he just doesn't really have any friends and Loki is like failed by humanity and when like he does it with survivability, he does it with a survivability, not with a full heart. And see then, when not only Rocky had showed him true love, even sacrificing each other to save one another, even if like Rocky is an alien or whatsoever. And secondly, then, so what is the debate? So what is the debate about then? We think that this is not inherently an actor motion, but because Grace is making the most important decision ever, the most important actor that we should nudge on is definitely Grace, right? Because his decision, but like remember that his decision is not on is also based on the past events as well. So this is not solely just a morality motion, but also to reconsider what Grace has been through his entire life. Couple of arguments then. Firstly, is that why Grace as an individual should definitely have Rocky, and why Rocky's world, well, Rocky's alien world is just as important, right? Because important context here, both of them are like saving each other and like they spend some time in Rocky's alien planet too, and Rocky's trying to help the alien humanity too, right? And so then and so then why does this even matter then? With that, there's three reasons. First is that just considering his initial trauma, right? Because back on Earth, he was constantly neglected by NASA team. His input was all constantly rejected. He just got failed by everyone. And secondly, then he is just being coerced by the mission, right? He said he didn't even want to go to the mission because knowing that the low probability of surviving, knowing he could die, like even his teammates also died in the mission, right? And so he is coerced, risking his own life. Thirdly, then this is exactly where Rocky come to help. Not only that, Rocky also save Ryland Grace's life. Rocky also makes Ryland feels appreciated once, also in his planet too and whatsoever. But what does this mean? That this means two things. Firstly, is that inherently Grace also has the obligation to help Rocky as an individual too, right? Because the genuine scale of impact that Rocky has done to Grace is also significant as well. Secondly, then is that just Grace like doesn't have any other friends and any other connections than Rocky, and within that it is very significant to Grace too, right? But the preemptive, why is quote unquote saving humanity is not a good enough reason, and why should that be inherently flawed in the context of this debate? Wouldn't this motion and this context requires you to think higher and deeper and in a wide broader scale than having to save humanity? Because this is not in real life. This is just the irrational basic premise that we as human have because we just have the cognitive abilities, right? Because notice in this imaginative world, it is the world that have a lot of other creatures, a lot of other aliens that also have the same cognitive capabilities too, like us, like humans, that they also deserve a right and a life and be safe too, right? Like Rocky too. That's why Rocky is Grace's friend. And okay, and And so then yeah, let's move on to our second argumentation. Then why is helping Rocky the highest moral agenda to be upheld important in this context? Hmm. Within that, there's three parts here. Firstly is that within that, if you don't save Rocky, not only will Rocky also die because his fuel is about to run out, but so does everyone else on his planet. We also have to notice like these creatures that have the same cognitive capabilities as us is also putting their life online on Rocky too. And within that, just simply saying like to save humanity is just not important in the context of these creatures as well. And and secondly, then within that is also important, which is like within the context of the movie in and of itself. Within that Rocky can just save Earth either way, because notice that this planet have like really smart aliens and all. And so then at the end of the movie, actually it would just get a happy ending, because Rocky ended up I don't know, helping humanity too, with Grace. And so it's kind of like a win-win situation, right? This is important. And but thirdly, then, even if you believe it won't happen, why we also win within this context is within two reasons. Within that, firstly is that Grace never really properly consented to be the part of the mission. I mean, this is like the principle of consent, meaning like the flawed yes means a no, which everyone should uphold. And like I don't know, Grace never really consented to put his life on the line, and so he is just coerced into this mission, like his other teammates do. That means that the principle of reciprocity never applies uniquely to Grace, because he is just, I don't know, coerced into this too, right? And secondly, then, because like the general absent because like this is very important, because like absent the help of Rocky, the cure will actually never be discovered to begin with. Because notice that in the story, and in the context slide, how does the cure actually get obtained at the end of the day? Is because Rocky has helped Grace. It's because Rocky saved Grace's life, and they both search for the cure together. And so then Rocky also took part is an important part of obtaining the cure in and of itself, right? Without Rocky, there will be no cure. And so then within that, there's a moral obligation to help him too, to help Rocky too, because generally humanity wouldn't even survive without Rocky too, right? And yeah, because of the important context, the only way fair for both of them, both Rocky and Grace, is to either get the cure, both of them get the cure, or none of them will get the cure. This is simply because they all want another to get the cure at the end of the day. And so and so on a broader sense of morality, and a broader sense of thinking, we think that this is exactly why we should help Rocky, because like not only like the Earth will also get saved either way by the small aliens like Rocky's planet. It's because that to make it fair, Rocky also help Grace help Grace find the cure too. And so then this is why you should vote for proposition.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Calling for supposition. Here.
Um, Checking if I'm audible.
Agak echo, by the way.
Sekarang udah enggak ya?
Try reading the motion.
This house believes that Ryland Grace should abandon his return to Earth to rescue Rocky.
I think it's fine enough.
Okay. Let me set up my timer first. Starting my speech in 3, 2, wait, 3, 2, 1. What we're going to do within my speech is simple. We're going to engage on how we give the most fulfillment towards Ryland Grace, which Gov also conceded to be the most important thing within this debate. But I think they were very dismissive on the impact of humanity itself. And so far, this is still a THPT motion. I think it is still considered within this debate, but still a huge chunk of our case will engage to them. A few clarification on Ryland Grace characterization then. Firstly, what is important to note that maybe no one appreciated his research. Maybe he was shunned or whatever, like proposition want you to believe. But Ryland still decides to dedicate his life to this research. He still dedicates his life to science, which means his passion for this research itself is enough as a source of fulfillment for Ryland Grace, which means it doesn't mean that Rocky is the sole fulfillment in Ryland Grace's life. I think then this research and this purpose that Ryland Grace uniquely have is enough as a source of fulfillment. But secondly, what is important to note is that Grace feels very obligated to deliver the solution because one, Grace knows how significant this is and how entirely like the Earth relies on him to deliver the solution. But secondly, it is the fact that his teammates already died exactly as what proposition wants you to believe. But what this means then is that Grace already have the moral obligation, the personal obligation to, and which will influence what he does and how he thinks of certain decisions later down the line. But thirdly, what is important to note is that government is very uncharitable when they say that Earth can still be safe at the end of the day under their side because alien civilization are advanced as well, whatever. I think then we still strictly needs to follow the context. Like the context like clearly said that if he turns back to rescue Rocky, humanity will never receive the solution and will perish. This is not a debate strictly about Hail Mary. This debate still needs to adhere to the context side as well. What then is the important analysis missing in government? Firstly, is that Ryland Grace needs a massive amount of astrophage to go into space to find the Tau Ceti and bring back the solution on how to, destroy the astrophage and save humanity, right? Note, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity because if you miss out on this, you essentially need a long and like decades of even hundreds of years to go back to find Tau Ceti as well. Insofar that the amount of energy, the amount of preparation and the sacrifice made, it cannot be done for the second time. Grace knows how crucial this is, and Grace knows how significant his sacrifice, his efforts are, which means this moral obligation that Grace inherently have on a personal level probably will influence how Grace acts, how Grace thinks, and what kind of decision will bring Grace most fulfillment at the end of the day. First, one simple argument then on how we give most fulfillment towards Ryland Grace. What is then the important framing? Note that finding the solution has been Ryland Grace dedication and Ryland Grace goal for such a long time, which means this is his purpose. In the movie, he was already a dedicated biologist. He probably has already been dedicated to solving this issue since a long time, for example, and he knows this is such an important issue, right? How then do we fulfill his lifetime purpose? Because this is when he feels like he fulfills his own personal goal by delivering the solution because he dedicated himself to this goal. His teammates died for this goal, for example, which means he has this kind of obligation, right? But secondly, this means that the solution itself has been a part of Grace's identity. It is important, which means that when it is integrated to Grace's identity, only by giving the solution back to Earth can Grace feel complete and whole as a person. Because the moment that Ryland Grace chose to be a biologist, the moment that Ryland Grace chose to be to do research, even though he was shunned and no one appreciated his research, the moment Ryland Grace chose to board that spaceship, he imposed himself this burden that he needs to perform. He needs to deliver the solution back to humanity for the sake of humanity and for the sake of completing his whole personal goal and ultimately fulfilling his purpose. But thirdly, Grace is probably already pressured to find the solution by other parties as well. Other parties, i.e., like the whole humanity on Earth, because the whole humanity in the movie knows that Ryland is their whole soul hope for solving this problem, right? The whole world knows about it, which means Grace has the kind of obligation to do so and will probably do so. I'll take that.
If he doesn't save Rocky, it means every single creature in Rocky's planet will die. How do you prove humanity as a collective is more important than Rocky's species as a collective?
Firstly, I think because like Grace already have more attachment and connection towards humanity as a whole because it's human. He's probably already surrounded. He probably already also have like a family on at the very least. I think then he is more exposed to the beauty and the bad of human and that is exactly what makes humanity important for Grace in and of itself. Why then are you likely to get closure and overcome that grief even if you let Rocky die? Firstly, you see the direct benefit of your solution to the people on Earth. You see people feeling grateful to you. When you see such a huge amount of people's livelihood improve because of you, you feel like your sacrifice matters. You feel like Rocky's sacrifice matters, right? Because in the movie, like Rocky give the fuel to Grace willingly, which means that it is not out of coercion that Rocky died. For example, it is out of wanting to help humanity and like probably wanting to help Ryland Grace to begin with. But secondly, you feel appreciated for the first time, and this is important exactly because Ryland Grace are already shunned for such a long time, right? Which means when you feel appreciated, you kind of feel you have you have fulfilled and you have improved as a person because you feel this kind of appreciation that you haven't felt before. But thirdly, you're no longer over encompassed by this obligation that you need to save humanity. This relief is enough to overturn any negative feelings you might have because of the sheer significance of this obligation. Then what happens on their side of the house then when you chose to save Rocky? If they choose to save Rocky, probably Ryland Grace needs to live with Rocky, and this is very charitable on the frame that Rocky and Grace will not die alone on the space, right? What then happens when probably Ryland Grace save Rocky and live with him? You feel guilt. Ryland Grace will feel guilt because one, this guilt is heavy, and not only for Grace, and it will show up every time he interacted with Rocky. He will constantly be reminded that he could have saved an entire planet, that the whole humanity relies on him, and yet he failed them. This puts an added strain towards their friendship, and it would mean that the very friendship he was trying to rescue would have been lost anyway. For example, how you then would receive PTSD around him, for example. How maybe he wouldn't even agree with your decision, how he will constantly blame himself for you saving him for a long time after that, because at the cost of saving Rocky, for example, Ryland Grace sacrificed his entire planet. What will happen when you hold this to yourself? You always think about it, which means this guilt is all encompassing. You impose yourself this burden that you don't know you can hold for how long, even when you interact with Rocky, which means that this guilt will probably impact every facet of Ryland Grace's life. It impacts how Ryland Grace perceive Rocky. It impacts how Rocky perceive Ryland Grace. You're likely to perceive anything in a negative way when you know you failed your entire planet. Why then on weighing, guilt is eternal and will outweigh any other thing that they might bring? One, because it keeps nagging you for the rest of your life. On a personal level, no matter how many memories you make with Rocky, you're still reminded by the fact that billions of humans suffer because of your decision. But secondly, you will always be reminded of it in every interaction. Every time you see Rocky, for example, you picture for example, the humanity who relies on you and how you failed them. On weighing why then humanity is still important in the long run. One, because no matter how long Grace and Ryland have spent time together, you still have more connection to humanity as a whole. Maybe those kind of things are bad experiences. You can still see the beauty in human, and that is what makes human beautiful in the first place. That is what gives Ryland Grace attachment towards human to the first place. But secondly, yes, maybe Rocky is his friend, but you're staking an entire humanity just to save someone that you barely know and develop friendship. Therefore, on scale of impact, we already win by default when they concede this kind of impact to under our side of the house. For all those reasons, proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Calling second government here.
Am I loud and clear at this volume?
Yep.
Okay. Heavily encourage a POI because it will increase engagement. We'll be taking it verbally. Don't badger since I'll be taking it in between our clashes. Wait, actually, I'm reconfirming my background is kind of noisy right now. Am I still properly audible?
I don't hear any background noises.
Oh, okay, great. Starting in 3, 2, 1. 2 points of framing for my clashes. The first of which, the first and most important thing to establish on the top of my speech is the spirit of this motion. We need to understand, so far as Grace is an actor making this decision, justifying his decision is not just an utilitarianism or humanity needs to be saved template, but the thing that we need to talk about is if it's something that Grace would inherently do in the inner day. Because the problem with opposition was they're dismissive to the extent that they just say, Grace cares about science and therefore protecting science and humanities is important to him. We told you this is not the case because science in and of itself has already failed him at the point of which all of his research has already disappointed him. Do you want to know what research he did before he ended up becoming like the scientist that's part of the mission? He researched that like living creatures did not need water to like survive or something like that. And this research and like this project in and of itself have proved his entire life's work and his and like literally everything he's built up his life and knowledge for as something that is meaningless. He was a very depressed person at the point of which he entered this mission, exactly because he has been neglected by humanity as a whole, because he literally does not have any friends, family, or anyone that mattered to him, and all of his research that have brought him up to this point have already disappointed him. That is why Rocky is inherently the only thing going well for his life. That is why the connection that he has with Rocky is inherently so special and very all-encompassing as for him as an individual. But secondly, the reason that first exchange becomes like has no clear resolution of what the impact was is because opposition fell into the trap of just assuming, oh, saving humanity is the biggest moral obligation you have as a human. We do not think that this is the case. I think that there's like its own big and broader debate, but what Sana has already portrayed to you and Sana has framed to you was very important. In order for this debate to be charitable, in order for anyone to judge this debate, we need to take a step back and view this thing on a broader and deeper sense, because getting resolution for humanity is not the most important resolution in this debate. So far as every single creature within Rocky's planet are also autonomous beings, which also have their own moral obligation and also have their own moral right to stay alive. That is why they also matter within this debate. That out of the way, yeah, you know what, Cheryl, take that POI.
Your PM mentioned to you that these aliens are smart, and there's chances if Grace goes with Rocky, Grace can be sent back to Earth. How? I think it already a contradiction with your case, because yeah, Rocky's planet can just like send another researcher.
Yeah, but if that's your argument, then a different human researcher could send somebody to so that Grace's decision doesn't matter and this debate doesn't run. I don't get that POI. Two clashes in this debate. One, why Grace has a moral obligation to Rocky as opposed to Earth. And secondly, why as an individual, saving Rocky then becomes the best life choice for Grace, irrespective of any principle. Firstly then, why does Grace have a higher moral obligation to protect Rocky than Earth? The first thing we're going to establish is how Grace got here to begin with. What Sana has already told you was very clear. Grace was a very depressed person. His life was miserable, and the only reason he went to this space to begin with, the only reason he went to this mission in which the people of NASA literally told him the chances of him coming back and surviving as an entity and still being able to live on Earth was very small percentage. That is why they call it Project Hail Mary, was literally because he was coerced to be doing so to begin with, because like one of his because like many of the astronauts had problems. I forgot the issue. I think he got like eaten by like the bacteria or something like that. But it just generally means, so far as we still, as a humanity, genuinely believe that a flawed yes equals to a no, and so far as Grace was forced to make that yes when he as an individual did not want this to begin with, just proves to you humanity have already failed him to begin with. I think that moral is inherently abstract in nature. The reason that Grace felt any sort of like reason to live, or the only reason why Grace wanted to have something, was because he met Rocky to begin with, and therefore protecting him becomes important. What did opposition tell you in response? The first thing they told you is, he dedicated his life to science, and fulfilling this obligation through the means of science is important to him. The thing we're going to point out here is this: if the only thing that matters to him is when his knowledge is becoming useful, then we tell you that this is going to be fulfilled better under our side. Why? Because it means at the point of which he saves Rocky and Rocky's planet becomes safe, he understands that it was because of his knowledge that Rocky's planet becomes safe, and all of Rocky's friends and like creatures within this planet is also safe because of his ideology and because of his ability to uphold science. So we fulfilled that metric too. The second thing they told you, but humanity provided the rocket to Grace. Humanity probably couldn't have done it without him. The first thing we're gonna point out, so far as he was unable to make a conscious decision, there was no reciprocity obligation to begin with. The reason this is true and the reason this is important is because if somebody does something to you, but you've never consensually agreed to it, there is no obligation for you to repay that benefit, to give you something back, so far as you have never consciously agreed to it, because you are a conscious, autonomous individual. But secondly, humanity has already failed him when they forced to launch him as opposed to finding an alternative. Because you need to understand, the people of NASA could have just waited 1 or 2 months, find a different astronaut to help to like replace Grace, and Grace could have never needed to make this decision to begin with. But they didn't do that because humanity was selfish and thinks of Grace as a disposable outcome. That is why we think that obligation as an individual towards Rocky is important. Second clash then, talking about why Grace as an individual will live happier at the point of which he self Rocky. Here's the thing. The question that is relevant now is, do we think Grace would have lived a more meaningful life in Rocky's planet or back on Earth? There's two things I want to talk about. The first of which, when Rocky asked Grace during a moment in the spaceship watching a video, Grace, do you have mate question, Grace revealed that he doesn't and had never had any meaningful connection with any human back on Earth. In the other hand, Rocky literally has a mate. He has a family. He has people who genuinely care about him. The reason why most cartel movies you see like no, don't kill him. He's a father and he has kids is because you empathize at the point at which an autonomous individual have other people or have other being depending on him or caring on them as an individual. Back on Earth, literally nobody cares about Grace, but back on Rocky's planet, everybody cares about her. A lot of people cares about Rocky. He probably have children or something that is like desperately waiting for him to come home. That is why we think there's a bigger obligation to save Rocky, because it means like just based on utilitarianism, more individuals will be happy when they got back, right? But the second thing we're gonna talk about, we're gonna talk about, like in the end of the movie, even if it's not part of the context line, Grace inherently has a happy time living back in Rocky's planet because genuinely connecting with an individual that has cared about him is important to him. But here's where my POI become important, right? We think that saving the entirety species of Rocky's planet becomes becomes very like important. But even if you don't buy that, I know this sounds unorthodox, but there's arguments to be made that life on Earth is really bad and going to be worse. Because if you watch the movie or if you know the context, it means that creatures and species within Rocky's planet literally does not have any conflict. Life there is really good because everybody like interacts with one another very well. The comparative on Earth is people like literally attack one another every single day. There's arson, there's robbery, there's victims of capitalism, there's victims of social injustice and like a class system that inherently puts people at a disadvantage. We think that so far as life in and of itself, the quality and possibility of life is higher and better in Rocky's planet. Even irrespective of any of that, protecting a kind of life that could have been higher in quality to begin with is something that you weigh higher. The last thing they told you is, guilt, because because Grace is going to feel guilt. The first thing we would tell you is that guilt is going to be so much deeper when you fail to protect your one and only friend in this entire life. As an individual, Grace have a deeper connection to Rocky as an individual than humanity as a whole. Because the second thing we're going to tell you is his connection to humanity is very little, probably the same extent as his connection to Rocky's species as a whole. And the last thing here, guilt when letting Rocky die is probably so much more overwhelming than letting humanity die for that reason you propose.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now calling second opposition. Here.
I will begin on the first word. I think we made it pretty clear since the beginning that Earth will not get saved anyways, that astrophages multiply and time us up the essence. The main mechanism Senna talked about was that the aliens in Rocky's planet is just like smart enough. One, if they're smart enough to save Earth, which is impossible, then they're smart enough to save themselves too. Please do bite the bullet. I'm not saying that aliens can make their own solution, but rather, one, saving Rocky does not mean you are able to get back to their planet. And two, the aliens have their own space travel. When they travel around to find a solution, then they can go to Earth once they figure out news that they go there by sending another researcher. Earthlings do not have that privilege of space travel, and they cannot really send any researchers there. Even if it did, this is not about saving the Earth. We think that this debate was never about saving your love against saving a planet of strangers. We think that this debate is about the nobility of sacrificing your love, and this is about saving your love or saving yourself. Your entire purpose for a couple of years and your goal for years and a major part of your identity. We disagree when Edgar told you that the connection that Grace has towards humanity is very little, because it is not about his connection about the people. It is not about the friends he has, but rather it is that he has tried to have that friends. It is rather that he has tried to gain recognition and has put his life purpose as it and has tried for years and years to gain that recognition. We think that at the end of the day, when he fumbles, when at the end he does not even reach his original purpose, his original goal, he only proves to himself that he is expendable, that he cannot be trusted, that he would not ever gain that recognition ever again. Note, this means two things. One, that even if Earth is safe, the guilt still comes. The feeling that you are useless, that you are expendable, still comes, but also jealousy. That's cementing the feeling that you will never be validated, that the people on Earth will never see your recognitions, your recognition once they're dead or they're disposed and replace you with another researcher, for example. But secondly, note this does not mean you stagnate within your identity of wanting to gain validation, but rather you finally achieve a goal you set for yourself. You stick to your own ideals and principles and prove to yourself that you can actually do something, that you actually trust yourself. Anyways, why is rescuing Rocky and not like a fixed impact anyways? Because at the end of the day, they got stranded, and we think that Rocky might reject being safe at the end of the day. Think about how he gave up his life as a sacrifice. This is just an act of mistrust, that you don't appreciate his sacrifice when you already left first and came back again, which at the end of the day, even if the movie happened that way, we think that in hindsight, this is not emotion in hindsight. Therefore, we would not know any of that information beforehand. But then let's talk about the initial trauma, because Senna tried to frame this as if this is a justifying aspect. Because even if you are like hated on by these people, by the people around you, you still have like a certain moral responsibility to care about them. Even if they like bullied you or whatever, it is still not within your justification to let them die and let all of their families that did not even do anything to you. That even in the fact here is that it is not humanity that gave up on like Grace. It is just a small portion of humanity that his environment was in. Like he can just go to another country or whatever, and he can find true love there. He can find people who actually appreciate them there. Does not mean that he has to go to another planet and that he has to literally destroy everyone on Earth, for example. But secondly, this also amplifies the guilt, because you don't feel sad, because you feel sad of the possibility of not ever getting that validation, because then the feeling of grief sticks to you and changes you when you realize that you can never fulfill your life purpose of getting that validation in the first place. I'm waiting here because Edgar told you all about how it's going to be a much better life for Grace within that alien planet, but it is then better as a moral responsibility of the people, because note, this is not a this house would motion. This is like this house believes that should motion. So we view this from the lens of everyone and how this would benefit everyone, because it is better to save the worst off planet when the planet within Earth is already suffering, when the people there are already living in misery and poverty. This is literally a vulnerability weighing. These aliens can save themselves. They already live a life of very purpose. While imagine if you live in a life full of misery, you feel that your life is pointless, and then at the end of it, you do not even get any saving. You do not even get any respite after that. You just die, for example. We believe that the vulnerability of Earth is something that you need to save over these alien planets in the first place. But then I'm going to talk about the tipping point on your friendship with Rocky. We think that at the end of the day, your friendship will become strained, not only because of the guilt, but all the other things that come from saving this. 4 points. 1, we think that all friendships are short term anyways. We think that friendships, no matter how good it is, will fade eventually. You as a person will change, and we cannot change that reality. Because of that, even if this friendship might be very tight and close right now, even if you might feel appreciated right now, it will change. And because of that, even the long-standing relationship might fail. When they told you things about true love and feelings, those are not things that are exclusive right now. Even if he does not have friends right now, that's just life and people grow. And the fact that he does not have any friends right now is only like a proof of his social inept. That means in the future, does not mean that he will easily be friends with the alien people. This only means he will still feel invalidated and unappreciated within this alien planet. Even if at first he feels appreciated, that's only by relative. Second point, we think that it is only in relative that he feels appreciated by Rocky. That at the point that everyone on Earth is gone, that at the point he no longer feels any worry about the people on Earth invalidating him, whatever, he will then grow to start expecting that invalidation. He will go to start expecting that other people around him neglect, because human brain sees patterns in other people's behavior. Therefore, at the long term, there is much more possibility of him just being insecure and him being like paranoid of Rocky's behavior, etc. But thirdly, we think on backlash. Think about how much Rocky might resent you because he literally just did sacrifice himself for you and you took that for granted. Most people have like big moral compasses, and imagine how much he would blame himself for letting an entire species of planet die. How much he would feel that his sacrifice was discarded, unappreciated, and useless. How much he would feel like like a burden, for example. But thirdly, we think that this also adds to the aspect of guilt. When both of you have this big traumatic incident, it is just very much like walking on eggshells. There's going to be times in the aftermath that you lash out because both of you are like reminders of the worst events that happen in your life, for example. But lastly, even if you never really cared about saving Earth, fighting for it is still a part of your identity. And when you lose it and when you stop being able to fight for your Earth, that is like a big behavior that you already cemented for yourself. The same feeling you would get as if you lost an important person in your life, you would get that same feeling of grief. This feeling of not only moral guilt, but frustration at yourself, and also a grief of losing a whole part of your identity is something that is damaging to you, that changes you a lot, and you also lose like a huge trust in yourself, thinking that the process of fighting for something in your life is something that will be useless for you. This means that at the end of the day, even if you live within this alien planet, you're still going to have problems with interacting with other people. You're still going to have problems with trusting yourself, and even more at the point that you already outright discarded your own morals. For all of those reasons, proud to stand on side opposition.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now, calling third speaker of the government. You're here.
Checking if I'm audible.
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, give me a minute to set my timer. Okay. POI preference, just unmute and say POI. Starting in 3, 2, 1. It was a blatant lie when Proposition told you that your view for humanity will still be good, despite all the bad experience they give to you. Because if this logic inherently flies, murderers will still be seen as innocent because it's just one flawed act. A victim will easily forgive like their bully because it was simply just a mistake. This is the utopic world that is far from reality, and this isn't a context you should weigh higher. And this is also isn't a reason for you to vote for side opposition. I'll posit 2 clusters under my speech. Firstly, I'll weigh on principle of moral obligation of race. Secondly, I'll answer the question of will the trade-off will still be worth it comparing to the trade-off they have on theirs. First theme is in terms of principle here. I'll firstly like to take back the sole characterization we've already posited on Senna, that grace has already been failed by humanity, and this wasn't inherently a full yes of consent from her to begin with. What do they say in regards into this? Firstly, they say that perhaps it is true, but he's still there anyways. So it's still there. So there is still a form of fulfillment, and there's still an obligation that is inherently way more massive compared to the fulfillment. One, the fulfillment they uphold is really, really vague because it only underlines on the practicality that saving humanity will give to us, when it's infinitely way more uncertain, given the fact that both sides already concedes of how it has already failed grace beforehand. We told you that a fresh start is infinitely way more safer comparing to like giving a second chance towards something that has already failed you. But secondly, and this is important, human obligation inherently change according to survivability. And this is incredibly likely because humanity actually adopt the greed of like prioritizing yourself and people who you think is important, because we only feel our own feeling, we only care most as far as it affects us at the end of the day. And given the fact that Rocky inherently give this unique like feeling towards Grace, for instance, this is something that we should incredibly prioritize first. So the implication of this becomes inherently important because this proves how his moral compass of obligation fails on their side of the house. The second thing they say was in terms of how their argument of fulfillment that only goes to the line of goal, dedication, and relief. One, I think it's merely untrue that this is his entire personality, because this is inherently assumptive to begin with. Both sides doesn't know what Grace inherently feels. We both don't know what his actual passion within his heart actually is. But what we can actually assume in this debate is the context of what already happened towards him. For the fact that he's already abandoned, unrespected, and doesn't like inherently know that NASA have already signed him up for death, which all his teammates have already died with. I feel like what becomes what view of humanity within Grace already inherently changed from the moment that his teammate already died. But secondly, then the likelihood of the scale of impact for the fulfillment is incredibly big on their side of the house as well, because it only goes to extent whether or not humanity will give back something that is going to be way more fulfilling, that Rocky can actually that can actually outweigh what Rocky have already given you, when we've proved the numerous likelihood as to how this is incredibly unlikely. The last bizarre claim they say in a bit of desperation was the fact that guilt will be inherently massive, which has been pushed by how like Rocky would also probably blame you for not saving your humanity, and all you're gonna get from seeing him as PTSD. One, Rocky not wanting to save him, like Rocky not wanting you to save him, is a blatant lie. Because Rocky doesn't even care about humanity that he never even interact with, beside Grace. But two, this is incredibly unlikely, given the fact that he has already sacrificed to you. What he would actually likelier to expect was the fact of reciprocity of you saving him, and this is something that is only achievable on ours of the house. Thirdly, what should weigh higher was Edgar's response, because guilt will be bigger and more direct when you sacrifice who you love. This is why husband that choose to save his child compared to his wife in labor mostly become depressed, because you had a real bond with someone you've already inherently loved, and it's inherently uncertain on the other hand. So the weighing of this clash become incredibly simple. One, that reciprocity has become way more higher, given the fact that Rocky has already Rocky has already given away like more sacrifices compared to what humanity does. But two, the bond that you have with Rocky is inherently irreplaceable, considering the fact that you've already experienced nearly life and death situations with him. Before second clash, I'll take point.
If humanity fails Rocky and this fact affects him so much, why not just let humanity die in the first place and run to alien civilization of Rocky?
This is what we're literally positing on ours of the house. I feel like that question should have been questioned on yours of the house, because exactly when you concede into how humanity have already failed you, and this already feeds into how we're how our case is already winning. I don't really get that why. Second theme is in terms of trade-off here. The first thing they told you, the thing that DLO tried to solve on his speech was the fact that the likelihood of you getting fulfilled from the life in Rocky's planet is not inherently good and is not inherently likely to begin with. One, we argue that the likelihood of him actually having a better fulfilling life is still better on the comparative as to what he's already been experiencing on the earth. Because considering the fact that he's already he has already failed, humanity has already failed him to begin with, there's never any bigger likelihood of him giving a second chance is going to be anyhow better. But secondly, then in that same speech, he told you that friendship will fail anyway. This make their stance inherently way, way, way more unclear. Because what is inherently driving Grace's incentive on theirs of the house? We told you that is inherently the actual bond you have with Rocky in and of itself, and because we're talking about a human that have the emotion to feel of how to feel and prioritize what you feel towards people who actually love you, we think that this is a way better, clear incentive as to how you even want to make that decision to begin with. And we told you numerous justification and benefit that Grace and the bigger actors that we're talking about in the spectrum is gonna feel. The last thing they told you was the fact that they said that humanity will die anyways and aliens are not gonna help you at all. Okay, dismiss all the solutions. We've already still proved to you numerous justifications as to why the trade-off of not saving humanity is still inherently important. So what should you win here? For the opportunity of you to inherently have a way more fulfilling life is still something that is way more achievable. But secondly, then on scalability, we still inherently win, because the thing that what opposition have never nudged in this debate was the fact that there's not only does humanity exist within Earth in and of itself, but it also inherently exists in the other species and the places that Rocky inherently lives in. And we'd argue that the scale of the people that we could have saved in there and the scale of people that could have given us a better opportunity will still be achievable under ours of the house as well. But lastly, for the fact that this cure wouldn't be achievable absent Rocky saving his life, for instance, Grace could have just died before even finding the cure to begin with, and this is an obligation that you should weigh higher for the reason that Rocky indirectly helped you to get that cure. So at the end of the debate, what should you actually have on your notes here? One, on the principal obligation that both sides concede into how Rocky and Grace already have a significant relationship that other humanity cannot inherently offer towards Grace in and of itself. But secondly, then we still win on the scale of scalability, considering the fact that there's also a numerous amount of species that we can still obtain at the end of the day, and for the fact that we can get a better opportunity to have a fresh start for Grace. This is something that you should inherently stand for proud.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now, calling third speaker of team opposition. You're here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
POI preference, just unmute. I'll be taking if I have time. Wait. Net. Okay. Yeah. I'll start my speech in 3. Wait, is it still loud here?
There was some background noises for a second there, but
Wait, let me still move please. Okay. Kalau nggak pinjam HP lu dong, pinjam HP lu. Oh, ya udah. Wait, let me change device.
I'm sure.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Yes.
Okay.
Ada ekonya by the way.
Yeah, okay. Is it clear now?
Yep, udah aman.
Okay. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. There's one important framing here that at the end of the day, that at the end of the day, the amount of astrophage that exists in a Grace spaceship is limited and just depleted and how Rocky already give consent to give some amount of astrophage to give like most amount of astrophages that he has to Grace. So at the end of the day, I think the consent for so I think at the end of the day, the consent of Grace deciding to betray what Rocky's desire should be outweigh in this debate should outweigh the consent of Grace to not save humanity. So to stand on side opposition. Okay, let's be clear. First, I think unlike what government tried to make you believe, the fact is that Ryland Grace is a normal person. From the fact that he still said yes to Hail Mary project, even when humanity fails him, even when no one appreciates his research, the fact that he still risks himself to save humanity means he does not necessarily always think about what is good or bad for himself, which means that he's probably not as smart as Edgar, that he will weigh how humanity's moral is bad because of arson of murder and how alien civilization is better because life is good. What he does think about, what he does think about is what we told you on top of our case, that this is his life purpose and this is the biggest part of his identity. This is what got missed throughout the entire debate. But secondly, on the consent itself, I think eventually Ryan gave consent, right, to go into this spaceship because Ryan are persuaded because there's literally no second chance to save humanity, right? And how Ryan find meaning in this project. For example, Ryan gained friends in this project. They gain engineer friends. They gain almost intimate relationship with his boss. And I think at the end of the day, Ryan can actually decide to save humanity, which I think this also neutralized the case on Ryan's don't have the consent. But then thirdly, I think Grace life. Okay, 2 points of clashes. First, on principle, they mentioned to you, oh, Rocky's planet is also important. First, I think just to prove the likelihood to save both planets, I think they need to prove that humanity is not worth the save, regardless of, like, for example, they need to save, yeah, and also they need to explain to you why it won't be symmetrical on Rocky's planet because it has been never picturized from the very get-go how Ryan will live good on Rocky's planet, right? Because insofar I think Rocky's planet insofar that Rocky is an astronaut, Rocky probably came from a middle to upper class, and I think crime will still exist in Rocky's planet.
arson will still exist in Rocky's planet. So at the very best case, it's symmetrical on both sides of the house. But then, secondly, I think the comparative is not about saving two planets or not saving both of them, but it's to only save one planet. That's why humanity is therefore important. First, I think the moment that a Grace engaged with this project is the moment that it gives them purpose. Ryland gaining new friends, almost a relationship with his boss, and how it gives him happiness inside this shallow sacrifice. All of the sacrifice won't matter if humanity, whereas you came from, are dead. You don't do this because it harms your identity. It gives you some grieving at the end of the day. But secondly, they mentioned to you, oh, saving humanity is not good because there's skills, etc. First, let's imagine the actor here is Grace. I think regardless of what others think, Grace's main purpose is to help people. But secondly, I think there's already a collective understanding, a collective agreement with his engineering friends that also exist inside the ship, that also sacrifice more. I think Grace does not. I think at the end of the day, Grace should stick with the collective agreement to save humanity rather than being selfish and save a Rocky. Okay, rather than being selfish and save Rocky, even though you only knew him for like days or months. I think his friends literally sacrificed for humanity. It's not only on Grace's consent, but you have to consider the research team that Grace has developed relationship. And at the end of the day, it will also betray the collective agreement when Grace only saved Rocky. But then thirdly, they mentioned to you, oh, Earth is worse. First, I think it's symmetrical. Insofar that the movie only gives us limited amount of picturization of Rocky's planet is little, and probably Rocky comes from a middle to upper class. Crime will still exist in Rocky's planet. Capitalism will still exist. The cruel human nature does also exist. The best is symmetrical. But second, I'm going to flip, and it's the only chance to prevent humanity in a worse condition, because we already mentioned to you from the very get-go that there's no second chance for humanity. That's why Ryan Gosling is literally forced to go there. And there's no other options. Global warming is pictured as something that keeps worsening eventually. It's often that they're dying. There's no second chance. And yeah, I think there's also a contradictory point from their PM mentioning that Rocky's planet already a good planet, smart, and they can just send another researcher for and they can and they can like send back Grace to Earth at the end of the day. I think there's also a contradiction here because Rocky's planet is already good, is already smart, and they can just send another researcher to save their own planet. So at the end of the day, there's no one saving Earth, but there's probably someone that can save Rocky's Earth. So I think at the end of the day, you have to sacrifice. So I think at the end of the day, the principle of utilitarianism here is still playing here, which I think this is the main thing that you should weigh at the end of the day. The way here is simple. First, there's certainty that Earth is dying and no second chance of saving it. Insofar the PM can see to you that the aliens are smart, they can just send another researcher and save the Rocky's people. There's still a chance to save Rocky's planet. There's no chance to save Earth, regardless of that, oh, Earth is not worth the save. I think you should save them because it's still people. There's still good in humanity. There's still kind people that want to act kind, regardless of the crime that exists in Earth. You should weigh this far, far away. But secondly, I think Rocky already give you consent to sacrifice Ryland, which they never engage. Okay, which means that at the end of the day, you as a good friend of Rocky, you have to follow Rocky's desire to help them, to help humanity, to save humanity, and okay, rather than saving Rocky, which I think it is still uncertain whether you can save Rocky's planet or Earth planet because the depleting of Astrophage as their main energy. Okay, second clash on Grace fulfillment. The point here is simple. Oh, it's not the desire of Grace. First, judge, sacrifice is never about desire. It's probably you try to assure yourself that your sacrifice is worth it. But secondly, Rocky in other place already sacrifices Astrophage to be given to Grace. And we believe that that's a consideration. That probably Rocky's planet can send another ship to do another research on Astrophage. I think this goes against the principle of trust when Rocky already given the Astrophage to Grace, but Grace decides to just gamble it to save Rocky, which I think that at the end of the day, this just like you betray your friends and probably you also betray the entirety of humanity. I think and we appreciate that Rocky wants to sacrifice for Grace, but when Grace saved him, there's a massive risk that both of them won't be saved. But thirdly, eventually Grace gives consent because he sees the humanity is worth the save. And when they do the project, i.e., he finds friends, engineers, co-workers that share the same goals and duty in sacrifice. So at the end of the day, they do have Grace do have consent. I'm going to neutralize this. But secondly, They mentioned to you, oh, when you save Rocky, you get fulfillment. Yeah, first, the reason why Grace are forced into the go into the shaped spaceship is because they don't have other people to do this. And so far, Grace the best option to save humanity. There will be a massive guilt if Grace is killed. But secondly, Judge, note that Grace also grieved for the death of his teammate in the spaceship, grieving that his teammates contribute the same amount of effort to save humanity. I think it's not a good. I think at the end of the day, collective consent is far better rather than only Grace consent. The way here is simple. Grace is not in a position to abandon humanity, insofar that collectively the team wants to save humanity and and Grace have to follow it as a team. But thirdly, oh, Grace is happier in Rocky's planet. Yeah, because Grace can save humanity by sending the tube of solution. You don't have this in the context side, which the debate won't exist if Grace can just send the solution. So at the end of the day, proud to stand on side opposition.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now calling up reply to close their case. Here.
Speech. 3, 2, 1. I think let's clear up the debate since the beginning. We're going to talk about how, at the end of the day, this debate is not about saving a bunch of strangers. It's not about saving this bunch of people that bullied you or whatever. It is about staying true to your ideals, staying true to your goals, and at the end of the day, having your identity be better because of that. Because when you think about this debate, sure, their Earth might be saved, sure, it might not be saved. Sure, Rocky's home planet might be saved, sure, it might not be safe, even though it's pointing towards more that the Rocky's Earth planet is like going to be saved anyways on both sides. At the end of the day, we tell you that it is not something that you should like basically trade off when you just have this one person that you just met for like a couple of days that basically has just a fleeting appreciation, that all the feelings you feel right then are something that are like just illusory. They're just like brain chemicals in your brain. At the end of the day, they're short, they're fleeting. Even if you feel appreciated, even if you feel validated, that's not gonna be the status quo forever. That's just how reality is. That's just how human life works. Because at the end of the day, people change, everything changes, and at the end of the day, because of the guilt you feel, that we pointed out, your relationship is not going to be the same anyways. But I'm going to highlight on that guilt because they try to flip us by saying that this guilt is something that is symmetrical when you lose your friend. But Nathan already pointed out from his very first speech that the guilt will be gone on the comparative when you have your friend sacrifice to a noble goal. When you look back on your friend losing you, it is not something that you need to be sad about. It's not something you feel guilty about, but rather you become appreciative. You still revere him after his death. He still exists within your heart even after his death. Therefore, the relationship, the validation, you will still feel that Rocky literally gave his life to save you. That is still a big amount of validation that you cannot deny still exists under our side. Therefore, the guilt is very exclusive under our side when you have all of those people that you lose. But not only that, but it is something that is tied to your identity. You literally have this guilt that you are just someone that runs away. You're just someone that cannot get anything done. And at the end of the day, that is a much bigger guilt that loses your self-trust. And at the end of the day, it ruins and strains your relationships anyways. Second point then, I'm going to talk about the relationship between Rocky and you and how at the end of the day, like saving Earth anyways is still a net better and like a moral compass. Everyone has a moral compass that you need to do because one, we already told you that Rocky can decide that he has already decided to do this. Therefore, it is in your interest to actually trust within his own choice to actually give him autonomy because you're his dear friend. If you want to appreciate him, then you do that by actually not letting his sacrifice go down, by not only the sacrifice of Rocky, but also the friends that you have had that have paved your way in order for you to actually be able to save Earth. But secondly, it is not about the validation, and it is not about that you live a better life in Earth after it is finished, but it is rather a matter of duty and moral obligation. Because when you compare it, Earth is worse off. Earth is already a place that is bad. Therefore, we need to give the people there some appreciation, some respite, some help from all of that. But thirdly, we already told you that the limit to where you live within Earth to when like Grace is being unappreciated is only limited to the environment he was in. Therefore, you cannot blame the whole entirety of humanity for something that only a small portion of the people has done. Therefore, most likely, it is not justified for you to do all these things by the evidence that some people have done, because you also need to consider that other people in other areas might have done differently. They might have appreciated you, might have given you the validation you need. Therefore, most likely, there are much more people that are just unjustly hurt by this. There are much more people that you could have better chances to. You still have much more options. You're only limited because you think you're limited. And at the point that you give up all of those options, then that is when you are truly restrained. You are truly never able going to get that true love. You are never able to get that friendship. Then you are never able to get that recognition. For all those reasons, proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now we post the debate, calling government reply. Here.
Am I loud and clear at this volume?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. 2 points of call out before my clashes. 1, all of Tiano's argument on Rocky resenting you does not matter because this debate is about absence of knowing a flaw in Rocky's spaceship. Rocky never knew that his spaceship was going to be all consumed by this virus, and he would actually be very thankful if you came back to solve him, right? Whip tried to double down on this, saying that, hey, Rocky consented to sacrifice, he literally gave you fuel. But no, that is not true, because saying Rocky consented to sacrifice, he did that because he made that decision under the assumption that both of them will have enough fuel to return to their own planet. It was never for him to him accepting that he would die and letting Grace live. But more than that, the only reason he gave fuel to Grace is because he cared about him as an individual and didn't want Grace to die out. So I think that if you were able to solve both of them and save both of them to live in the planet of Rocky, Rocky would be very happy. That deals with that. But secondly, I want to point out the huge contradiction under opposition, because Nathan proudly opened up this debate in agreement with Sana when he said, oh yes, we are talking about the interest of Grace as an individual. But then DLO tried to pivot and say, actually, you were talking as a complete objective third party that is all morally correct and doesn't care about connection or incentive. If I remember Kajoka's tipping point of round 3 doxa correctly, he told us that according to the Parliament debate rulebook, whatever is said first is assumed to be true for the side of opposition. So we assume we're talking in a wider scope of things. But even if we didn't want to abuse the rulebook, what Sana told you is clear, that so far as Grace is the only person who could make this decision, we're talking under his morality and under what he thinks to be true. But I'll be charitable and engage in weighing later why even as a complete objective third-party viewer, this is still the decision to make. The first clash then, under does Grace care more about Rocky or more about humanity? The first thing they told is, he cares about science. But no, it is not true, because the only reason he does this, the only reason he's part of Project Hail Mary, because he thinks it's a little escape from being bullied by the children within his biology class in high school, right? That's the only reason he do this, because he's literally miserable. The second thing they told is, Ryan found meaning in this project, he met friends or whatever. The first thing we're going to you, it's fleeting. The connection he had is fleeting because he never had a good connection with his boss. He was depressed when his crewmates all died around him. We think there's absolutely no happiness. But secondly, the only time he felt an ounce of happiness within his life is when he met Rocky. That is why we told you exactly protecting Rocky is very important. The next thing they told you is, you have to save humanity as a collective because they're suffering more. But I don't think this is true, because at the point at which you save humanity, which is already subject to capitalism for social injustice, etc., you never give them a solution to become better as a collective. At best, you only prolong their suffering. That is not something we want. What is the weighing under this clash? Very simple. The first of which, the last thing the op would tell you is that maybe in the future Grace could find a relationship and happiness within Earth. Then the tipping point in this debate becomes very clear. It is certainty, because for sure right now, if you come back and sell Rocky, he finds happiness. The alternative of maybe finding it in the future in Earth is very low to begin with. But secondly, even if I'm charitable and I operate irrespective of Grace wants as an individual, the tipping point in this matter is twofold. One, so far as Grace would have never found the cure without Rocky, it's either both of them gets it or no one gets it. I think it's very selfish for Grace to just take it and leave Rocky to die when, absent Rocky, he would have never found the cure to begin with. But secondly, under utilitarianism, you have the better chance of living, or you have the better chance of living in Rocky's planet, as opposed to continue prolonging the suffering that happens on Earth. But thirdly, the implication of all of this is simple, that his connection to Earth is probably equivalent to the connection of people of Rocky's planet, because he doesn't really care about humanity so far as he's constantly bullied. If saving either world is symmetric, then the tipping point is you get to save Rocky, which is your best friend, and that's the only thing that matters to him. Second clash then, under guilt, because this is what they have been pushing. The only thing that matters here is simple. The guilt of losing his one certain friend is going to be so much more all-consuming than the possibility of an outcome of being seen as an achieving person, as it is going to be so much more than anything he could like achieve on Earth so far as it's not certain. The weighing here is simple. One, Tiano's attempt of weighing under virtue ethics does not work. So far as you can never become a better person if you're constantly consumed by the guilt of losing the only one person that has ever mattered to you. But secondly, opposition's flip was that, oh, seeing your friend sacrifice is something that's noble. Then we could say the same thing is symmetric. Seeing your friends die in like the rocket with you trying to get the achievement is something that's noble for all those reasons proudly proposed.
Okay, thank you for that speech. That marks the end of the semifinal round. Once again, thank you for the debate, and see you in the announcement. For judges, I will move to Delete Room 1.